Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to the 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome to the Visitors Edition of the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. It is a bounce-back week for the Wolverines, and it's a primetime Saturday night television game. With us today is the legendary radio play-by-play voice of Indiana football and basketball, Don Fischer. But first, let's get it rolling with my view from Section 17. Let's start with a little coach speak. We have to forget about what happened last Saturday and focus on Indiana. We don't want one loss to become two. For the team, that is correct. For fans, I'm not so sure we all bounce back like that. It seems like over the last 7 years, we have been so close at times, and then we suffer a brutal and inexplicable loss like we did to the Spartans last weekend. We are then left wondering if the direction of the program is in reality healthy. We have 4 more games to prove that it is, or we will be heading for another winter of discontent. It all starts this week with Indiana. The Hoosiers have lost 3 quarterbacks this season. They are down to their last scholarship quarterback on the roster, and he is a true freshman. Their defense, until last week, has been pretty good. 2 weeks ago in Bloomington, they held MSU's Kenneth Walker to 67 yards and stifled the rest of the Spartan offense. So in this case, the coach speak is true. If we come out with a hangover instead of a steely resolve to fix our mistakes and finish in the red zone, we could find ourselves in a ball game. No looking ahead to a trip to Happy Valley. Get the job done and get better this Saturday night. My guest today has been calling the action for the Hoosiers for 48 years now. He says injuries and poor offensive line play factor into a lackluster 2-win season so far. He doesn't have high hopes for this Saturday's game in the Big House either. Joining us next is the radio play-by-play voice of the Hoosiers, Don Fischer. So stay with us. Here with us on our Visitors Edition this week is Indiana football radio play-by-play voice, Don Fischer. Don, once again, great to have you back with us.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
Well, Don, the Hoosiers lost another one, a tough one, Saturday in Maryland, 38-35. Man, I know there have been a myriad of quarterback injuries the Hoosiers have suffered through. Donovan McCulley, a true freshman, got the start. And he showed some flashes against the Terrapins, didn't he, Don?
He did. He played much better in his second opportunity of the year last week against Maryland. And without doubt, the first week he was really struggling. He came in; it was totally unexpected that he would be in the ball game, other than for certain packages that they had prepared him for. Because now being the backup after Michael Penix's injury, they had to get him ready to some degree. But I don't think that they got him ready to the point where he was totally comfortable with what he was doing. And then on top of that, you're facing an Ohio State team that's probably playing as good as anybody in the country. And then it rained like crazy for the whole entire ball game. So he had all kinds of issues in that first matchup. He looked more comfortable in the second half than he did in the first after Jack Tuttle went down after the opening drive that Indiana scored upon. But honestly, it was a real struggle for him. And then this week, he just looked like a different quarterback. He was totally comfortable. He looked like he knew what he was doing. He was much stronger inside with his run game and did a nice job throwing the football as well. He's got a great arm. He's got all the tools. He's going to be a special quarterback, I think, at some point in his career. But right now, he's put under the gun, so to speak, and he never had, of course, a spring game or a spring practice or anything like that since he was a graduate from high school. He was a basketball player, so he never came early last year. So the only thing, from a standpoint of getting ready for this season was the fall camp for the most part. So he's still very much in that learning mode.
That's a lot to put on a young kid just out of high school. As you said, he did not come in early. And he is isn't he the highest rated quarterback that Indiana's ever had come?
Certainly from the state of Indiana, he is. They've had a couple of other guys that were pretty highly regarded. I don't know if you remember the name Antoine Randall. I can't imagine you don't know that name. But nevertheless, Antoine was highly regarded coming out of high school, too, as an athlete, I think, as much as he was as a quarterback. But Antoine was probably the most highly regarded quarterback coming to Indiana prior to this kid.
Well, if it wasn't for bad luck, the Hoosiers wouldn't have any luck when it comes to the quarterback room this year. And as we mentioned, Donovan was supposed to be redshirted this year. But with Michael Penix going down and then Jack Tuttle, he was forced into action. Is there still some hope that Penix or Tuttle will be back soon?
Well, they keep saying it's a week-to-week thing. Penix has been out for ever since the Penn State game now. And Jack Tuttle, of course, played as the starter 2 games ago and didn't play very well in his first opportunity on the field against Michigan State. And then this past week, of course, he goes down, or at least against Ohio State, Jack goes down on the first drive after throwing a touchdown pass. He got hurt on the play. And I just don't know what their status is. It's an AC sprain in the sense of the shoulder injury for Tuttle, and it is to his throwing shoulder, I guess. And likewise, it's a separated shoulder for Michael Penix. And I don't know what his status is either. He was on the trip, but he never dressed for the ball game. Tuttle did not make the trip. They wanted to get him a lot of rehab time back home. So right now we're hoping that Tuttle's able to go this coming week, if for no other reason, that he could be the backup if something would happen to Donovan McCulley. But at this juncture, we just don't know.
Well, Don, for the last couple of years, Tom Allen has had the Hoosiers trending up. They had a great year last year in that COVID season. Most of us thought that would continue this season. I know all of the preseason magazines thought that too. With the quarterback room being decimated by injuries, what other factors have contributed to Indiana's struggles this season?
Well, in my opinion, the biggest problem has been the offensive line. And it was an offensive line that graduated just one guy from last season. It had 2 or 3 guys that moved around last year but played quite a bit. It was a veteran offensive line, and those guys have not done the job that was anticipated. They have not blocked very well for the run game, and they certainly haven't protected the quarterback like we anticipated that they would. And actually, they did a very good job of that last season. Of course, Penix did get hurt again, but that was an ACL that, as he was running out of bounds against Maryland, that it just popped again, the same ACL that he had surgery on a couple of years ago. So, honestly, the kid's been, really an Achilles heel has been his injury issues ever since he's been at IU at this point. And like I say, I don't know what the possibilities are in that regard, whether who's going to be playing a quarterback this week. My gut is that it'll be Donovan McCulley once again. Hopefully Jack Tuttle's ready to at least come in as a backup if need be in an emergency.
Well, this Saturday, the Hoosiers, as we know, travel to Michigan. It's going to be a night game now, 7:30 kickoff Eastern time. So if we could, Don, let's just talk about some of the key IU players on offense we're going to be seeing in the Big House, starting with that receiving core, which has been around for a few years now, and it's very impressive. So whoever's under center is going to have Freifogel and Peyton Hendershot to throw to, and those guys are big-time receivers, aren't they?
Well, they're really good receivers, but there's nobody there now with speed. There's nobody that is the deep threat that DJ Matthews brought to the table as a transfer from Florida State. And he was the guy that was taking the spot of Whop Phillier, who graduated last year. Phillier, of course, was everybody knows, was one of the more dynamic wide receivers in the league. DJ Matthews came in, and he was just starting to find his stride when he got hurt in the Western Kentucky ball game. And when he went out for the rest of the season, they lost that dynamic receiver that could get you downfield, that could separate himself a little bit. Ty Freifogel has always been a terrific possession-type receiver, but he has had problems with drops this year. And honestly, if you look at it, the other guys, Miles Marshall was okay last year. He was solid as a sophomore. He wasn't superstar status, but he did a nice job. Javon Swinton is a freshman who played very sparingly last year, but he came in this year, and we thought he might be a guy that they would target quite a bit. They haven't gone to him as much as I thought that they would. And really the best receiver on this team, with Freifogel having some problems with drops this year. Incidentally, Freifogel had shoulder surgery in the off season, and I don't know if that's played into what his struggles have been at this point. But he has not been able to be the 50-50 guy that he's always been one of those guys that could take the ball away from people. Against Ohio State last year, he did it 2 or 3 times in dramatic fashion and had some really good games in that regard on 50-50 balls. But this year it just hasn't been there, and honestly the best receiver on this team has been their tight end, Peyton Hendershot, and he has been terrific. He's been really spectacular.
Well, Don, in the backfield, Stephen Carr had 21 carries for 136 yards against Maryland on Saturday. He gets the bulk of the work in the Hoosier running game, doesn't he?
He does. We've lost a couple of running backs, too. Tim Baldwin left the team a few weeks back, and he was the best transferred before the season ever got started to Purdue. So they've lost 2 of the guys that they were really counting on to be guys that would be factors in the run game. And so they're down to this young man and a couple of freshmen that are starting to see a little playing time now, a guy named Trent Howland and David Holloman. They're both true freshmen. Both, I think, are going to be really good backs at some point. But they haven't had a lot of opportunity to show their wares at this juncture. It's been primarily Stephen Carr, and he is a solid back. He had his best run of the year against Maryland this past week, a 66-yard breakaway for a touchdown. And he's got speed, and he's a pretty nifty little runner inside as well. Not the most powerful guy you'll ever see, but still, can move people. So it's interesting. The run game, but however, has just been very sporadic at best because the offensive line has not done their job. And if you ask me, Mike, it's the offensive line that's been the biggest issue on the offensive side of the ball.
Well, if McCulley does get the start on Saturday, it's going to be, his second start? Is that correct?
It would be his second opportunity to start, and likely that will be the case.
And how much does that limit Nick Sheridan and what he can do on offense with this young man under center?
Well, it probably limits him some because I don't know how many reps he's actually gotten here until the last 2 or 3 weeks. So he's got more reps probably in the last 2 or 3 weeks than he has in all of fall camp and the rest of the season combined. So I don't think there's any question. They'll try to keep it as simple for him as possible. He really can move, though. He's he's 6'5", almost 6'5", and he's got great speed, and he's strong. He weighs 215 pounds now. They list him at 200, but he's put on about 15 pounds since he's been on campus. And he really can run with the football. He's got a tremendous throwing arm. The only thing he's dealing with right now is the inexperience and, of course, working with wide receivers that he's had very little time to prepare with.
Well, over on the other side of the ball, Don, the defense has been struggling too, which does not help matters. Yeah. Gave up over 400 passing yards on Saturday to Maryland. Coach Allen, I know after the game, said he was really disappointed with the D, but what has gone wrong on that side of the ball this year?
Well, that side's been hit by some injuries to key people. Tywan Mullen and Reese Taylor, they're 2 cornerbacks. The 2 starting corners have both been out here the last 2 or 3 weeks now. Reese got hurt in the Penn State game, has not played since. Taiwan played a little bit in the next game after that against Michigan State and kind of re-injured his ankle and has not been available since then. He did play a little bit in Saturday's ball game, but really limited, and he did not look like the same Taiwan Mullen we've known for the 3 or 4 years he's been on campus now. So honestly, the injuries in to those two guys have factored into it too. But I'm going to honestly tell you that I don't think it's just the injury factor at this point for the defense. The defense kept Indiana in every ball game that they played this year when the offense was doing nothing to help them. And I don't know if they've lost their will. I don't know if I don't believe they've given up because they played hard. And of course, they've got one of the best players in the country defensively in linebacker Mike McFadden, who's just been terrific. And it hasn't mattered to him what the score has been or what the situation is. He plays his heart out every single time he's out there in the field, and he continues to be the leader of the defense. But the rest of the defense has not performed the last 2 weeks now as we have anticipated that they would for the whole season, and we certainly thought they were good enough to do that. Unfortunately, against Ohio State, they just didn't handle it well. And certainly against Maryland, they were awful against the passing game.
Well, this Saturday night, as we mentioned, IU in the Big House against Michigan. It's a primetime game. But, you know, when you look at all of the injuries this team has suffered on both sides of the ball, and now you very likely are going to have a true freshman quarterback under center. And I know you just mentioned the team hasn't given up. They're still playing hard. But do they have enough on that roster to come in here and give Michigan a good test?
Well, my heart says yes. My brain says probably not. I mean, I've just watched this team. You know, when you have a ball club that comes in with the kind of expectations that Indiana was expected to have this year, with everybody believing that this team was probably at least a top 20 team, if not better. In some cases, a lot of people thought in a sports with all the experience they had coming back on both sides of the football, you would have thought that this team would come in and would probably not maybe dominate teams, but would certainly give everybody they played a real tussle. And up to this point, it's been their own mistakes and their own doing that has gotten them beat, especially in some tight games like the Michigan State game and the Cincinnati game. Both of those were very winnable football games, and Indiana couldn't get it done, and then they killed themselves against Iowa early on, and of course against Penn State they couldn't move the ball at all. So honestly, I don't know if they can beat anybody at this point, and I hate to say it that way. I just don't know. I don't believe that this team's quit, but at the same time, they've done nothing to make you feel like they've got a chance in any of the remaining games on the schedule. With Michigan coming up, they've got to play Minnesota, they've got to play Purdue, and they've got to play Rutgers. Rutgers might be the only game that you would look at on paper and say, yeah, they've got a good chance to win that game.
Well, I know Coach Allen has really upped the recruiting level at Indiana over the last few years, and there's a lot more players, a lot better players, I should say, on that roster. But would you say because of all the injuries, this season has been an aberration and the Hoosiers are set up to bounce back strong next year?
Well, I hope that that's the case. Again, I think they have enough. I think they have enough talent. The question is, especially in the offensive line, are these guys developed to the point where they need to be? And I think that's a real question mark. I think this football team's got some issues, and whether it's coaching or whether it's the players, or it could be a combination of both right now. This team has got some answering to do once this season comes to a close, because I think it's going to close badly if, in fact, we see what we've seen over the first 8 weeks of the year.
Well, a final question for you, Don, before we let you get away. You've seen Ohio State this year, just a couple of weeks ago, and IU has already played Penn State and Michigan State. We saw Penn State gave the Buckeyes a pretty good test on Saturday night in Columbus. Do you think the Spartans have any kind of a chance in 2 weeks down in Columbus?
No. Not based on what I saw, Mike, and I'm telling you, I believe that because I think Ohio State is playing at a level of which, it's probably arguably you could say they're playing as well as they have in the last 3 or 4 years, especially on offense. That offense looks special at this point. And I know that's saying something because Justin Fields was there before that, and you know what they had prior to that. So I just think they're playing at such a high level offensively. The offensive line just shoots off the ball. They just dominate the line of scrimmage. They did so against Indiana, and previous 3 ball games prior to that, they have just been dominating teams, and their defense has come along and gotten better and better as the season has progressed as well. So I thought Michigan State was a pretty good ball club when Indiana played them, and Indiana shut down their rusher. Kenneth Walker didn't do anything against Indiana, and their rushing game didn't do much either. And that's why we thought Indiana should have won that contest, because the defense held them in there. The offense just didn't do what they were capable of doing, or at least what we thought they were capable of doing. So if you ask me, I don't think Michigan State is – I think Michigan State really got up for Michigan. I don't think there's any doubt that that's always the case. But my gut is that they have no chance against Ohio State.
Interesting, Coach Allen's post-game presser after the Ohio State game, he didn't actually go as far as saying Ohio State was the best offense he's ever seen in college football, but he came close.
Yes, he did. and I can't argue with him based on what we saw that day. I mean, they were just special. And you know, the 3 games leading up to the Indiana game for Ohio State, they absolutely blew away all their competition. Now, granted, it wasn't the best teams in the Big Ten, but those teams had no chance against them. And honestly, I'm not sure anybody in this league can beat Ohio State this year. I think they look that good right now.
Well, Saturday night, the Hoosiers and Wolverines are going to be featured coast to coast, and it should be very interesting for a lot of reasons. Our guest today has been the longtime radio play-by-play voice of Hoosier football and basketball, Don Fischer. As always, Don, it's been a pleasure having you join us, and we look forward to another visit next year.
I thank you, Mike. Appreciate you having me on once again.
On Quick Hits today, no updates on the injuries to Cade McNamara or Eric All. On Monday, Jim said he was waiting to see how they were able to practice this week, so I guess we'll find out on Saturday night. Here are a few game day notes of interest. Michigan has a 59-10 advantage in this series all time. The first meeting was on November 3rd, 1900 in Ann Arbor, a 12-0 Michigan win. Last year on November 2nd, the Hoosiers steamrolled us in the Big House, 38-21. Tom Allen is in his 5th year as head man in Bloomington. His record is 26 wins against 28 losses. Last year, IU was 6-2 overall. They fell to Ole Miss in the Outback Bowl, 26-20. They finished the year ranked number 12 in the AP poll and number 13 in the coaches poll. The weatherman says the temps at game time on Saturday will be in the upper 40s. Winds are expected to be out of the southwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour, and there is just a 6% chance of rain. As I mentioned earlier in the show, we cannot sleep on this IU team. We need to get to work fast and pound these guys into the ground. And I know that's easier said than done, but here we are with another opportunity to fix our mistakes, right the ship, and keep getting better. It seems like every week we learn something new about this team. This Saturday, we learn how they respond to a heartbreaking loss. They cannot let it linger. Next week, we head to Happy Valley, or Death Valley, considering how we've played there in the last decade. Penn State has lost 3 games, but they are still a very good football team, and they will be ready for us. On Tuesday, my Michigan Game Day guest will be Chris Vallis from thewolverine.com. Then on Thursday, we are scheduled to be joined by Steve Jones, the radio play-by-play voice of the Nittany Lions. So make sure you join us. That does it for another week. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine weekend, everyone. Think victory, beat Indiana. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go Blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!